During the 13th century, the Mongol Empire embarked on a relentless series of military campaigns, securing an almost uninterrupted succession of victories that enabled them to establish the largest contiguous empire the world has ever seen, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to Eastern Europe. Join us on today's deep dive into history, as we unravel one of the most dramatic and unexpected military turnarounds of the medieval era, the story of how the Kingdom of Hungary rose from the ashes of devastation to triumph over the fearsome Mongol Empire. From the terrifying Mongol conquest of 1241 to the resilient reforms of King Bela IV and the decisive Hungarian victory in 1285. This is a tale of transformation, strategy, and survival. But before we dive in, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss our next historical investigation. In the 1240s, the Mongols launched a brutal invasion of the Kingdom of Hungary, decisively crushing the forces of King Bela IV at the catastrophic Battle of Mohi, which marked one of the most traumatic military defeats in Hungarian history. The devastation inflicted by the Mongol invasion left a lasting scar on the Hungarian psyche. It prompted widespread societal reforms as the kingdom braced itself for the possibility of another attack, determined never to be so vulnerable again. That fear was well-founded, because the Mongols would indeed return, in force, several decades later. In the year 1285, another massive Mongol force advanced once more into Hungarian territory, reigniting the threat of foreign domination. Would Hungary, now reformed and better prepared, be able to withstand the might of the Mongol war machine the second time around? In the aftermath of the catastrophe, King Bela IV faced the monumental task of rebuilding a shattered kingdom and preparing it for the possibility of another invasion. King Bela came to a sobering realization. Hungary's military and defensive infrastructure had been woefully inadequate to resist the Mongol onslaught. A key weakness was the kingdom's lack of fortifications. Astonishingly, many of Hungary's urban centers were completely unprotected, lacking even basic city walls. Only a handful of well-built stone fortresses had managed to withstand the Mongol siege tactics, highlighting the urgent need for more fortified strongholds. Meanwhile, Hungary's military relied heavily on lightly armored cavalry, who were no match for the highly organized and tactically superior Mongol forces. During the 1241 invasion, it was only a small force of heavily armored warriors, specifically the Knights Templar and the Teutonic Knights, who succeeded in dealing any meaningful resistance to the Mongol attackers. This raised a haunting question for the Hungarian leadership. How might the outcome have changed if they had fielded a large, well-equipped army of heavy cavalry? Determined to learn from the disaster, King Bela IV initiated a sweeping series of military and social reforms aimed at transforming Hungary into a fortress capable of withstanding future invasions. As a top priority, King Bela IV restructured Hungary's cavalry, transforming the previously light horsemen into a new military class of heavily armored knights, modeled after the Western European feudal chivalric tradition. In 1247, King Bela IV forged a strategic alliance with the Knights Hospitaller, ceding them lands on Hungary's vulnerable southeastern frontier in return for their military support. This support included the deployment of elite armored knights and the construction of defensive stone fortresses across the region. The following year, in 1248, Bela expanded the ranks of his cavalry by granting the honor of knighthood to members of Hungary's middle class, on the condition that they could provide their own armor and horse, thus strengthening the nation's military from within. To boost both the population and Hungary's long-term defense, the king invited foreign settlers to make Hungary their home, offering them noble titles and knighthood, if they came ready to fight, equipped with the appropriate arms and armor. One of the most important lessons from the defeat at Mohi was the surprising effectiveness of crossbowmen. Though few in number, those who fought in 1241 proved especially effective in countering Mongol tactics. Recognizing this, Bela negotiated an agreement with the renowned Venetian Republic, enlisting over 1,000 skilled Venetian crossbowmen to bolster Hungary's defences. As part of his broader defensive strategy, he also issued grants and incentives to encourage every Hungarian town to build strong stone walls and fortifications. These sweeping initiatives proved highly effective, resulting in the construction of nearly 100 fortified castles and strongholds across the kingdom. By the end of these efforts, virtually every major Hungarian city was encircled by solid stone defences, a vast improvement over the unfortified settlements of the past. By the time King Bela IV's reign concluded, Hungary had undergone a remarkable transformation, from a fractured, vulnerable state to a fortified, militarily rejuvenated realm, prepared for any future threats. Tragically, King Bela did not live to witness the ultimate test of his ambitious reforms. He passed away in the year 1270, long before the true impact of his work would be fully realized. 15 years later, in 1285, those sweeping reforms would face their most significant trial, with the arrival of a renewed Mongol invasion. During the harsh winter of that year, Nogai Khan, the unofficial but dominant ruler of the Golden Horde, set his sights on the west and led a formidable army into the heart of Central Europe. By that time, the Golden Horde, which controlled the northwestern territories of the former Mongol Empire, had been operating largely independently since the empire's fragmentation in 1259. It had become a sovereign power in its own right, and geographically, Central Europe was a natural next target for expansion, lying directly adjacent to their domain and offering both strategic and economic opportunity. Nogai Khan was determined to bring Hungary fully under Mongol control, viewing it as unfinished business from earlier campaigns. Confident of success, Nogai believed the Hungarians were fractured and vulnerable, especially after hearing reports of internal turmoil and political instability. That belief was reinforced when a significant number of Cuman tribes were expelled from Hungary, and subsequently aligned themselves with the Mongols, mirroring their earlier strategy from the first invasion. The Mongols launched a two-pronged assault against Hungary. Nogai spearheaded one column through the region of Prashov, advancing deep into Transylvania, while his relative and fellow commander, Talabuga, led another force through the Vereki Pass in present-day Ukraine into the Transcarpathian region. At this time, the Mongol Empire was enjoying a rare period of internal stability and peace. That calm allowed Nogai to assemble a massive invasion army, estimated by historians to number between 30 and 50,000 well-trained troops. Relying on their trademark tactics of rapid movement and shock warfare, the Mongols struck in the depths of winter, counting on speed, surprise, and the assumption that Hungarian defences would be unprepared. Nogai anticipated a swift, effortless victory over any opposition, but from the outset, there were signs that this campaign would not go as smoothly as expected. Talabuga, who commanded the main Mongol force in northern Hungary, faced immediate logistical challenges, struggling to secure food and supplies for his troops. This difficulty stemmed largely from Hungary's newly fortified defences, which had drastically altered the landscape of invasion. Anticipating the Mongol advance, rural populations had taken shelter within nearby castles, bringing with them essential resources like livestock and grain, effectively denying the invaders access to food. As a result, the Mongols advanced through regions stripped of valuables, unable to loot or resupply as they had in previous invasions. progressing past one impregnable fortress after another. The Mongol forces grew increasingly desperate. Food shortages became severe, and Talabuga reportedly lost thousands of his soldiers to famine during the march. In one of their early actions, the Mongols targeted the town of Pest, only to find it deserted. Its population had already evacuated to nearby fortresses, leaving behind no spoils. This pattern repeated across Hungary. The invaders consistently found themselves empty-handed, unable to seize either wealth or supplies. Launching a bold counterstrike, from the heavily fortified city of Buda, a unit of Hungarian knights executed a hit-and-run assault on the Mongol column. Contemporary accounts even note that Queen Elizabeth of Sicily witnessed the skirmish firsthand, from atop the city walls. As the campaign wore on, Talabuga grew increasingly exasperated. While his forces managed to push their raids as far as the banks of the Danube River, inflicting significant losses on unprotected civilians in a few areas. The overall success of the campaign remained elusive. In most regions, however, the Mongols found few targets. The rural population had already evacuated to the safety of the new fortresses, leaving behind empty villages and thwarting the Mongols' strategy of psychological and material domination. Not only were the Mongols denied plunder, but they also failed to breach any of the local strongholds, repeatedly facing resistance from heavily armored Hungarian knights who stood firm in defense of their homeland. The Hungarians skillfully exploited their fortified positions, launching tactical strikes against Mongol units, inflicting serious damage, and then retreating quickly to the safety of nearby castles, denying Talabuga the opportunity to retaliate effectively. A notable clash occurred near the strategically positioned castle of Terusko, where Mongol ambitions faced a significant setback. In this engagement, Mongol forces endured a crushing defeat, suffering substantial losses in the face of a determined Hungarian defense. Utilizing their superior armor and disciplined formations, the Hungarian knights launched powerful cavalry charges that shattered Mongol lines and wreaked havoc among their ranks. Emerging triumphant, the Hungarian forces captured approximately 1,000 Mongol soldiers, dealing a major blow to the invading army's strength and morale. The turning point of the campaign occurred in the rugged hills of western Transylvania, where Talabuga's depleted and weary army unexpectedly came face to face with the main Hungarian royal force under the command of King Ladislaus IV. In stark contrast to the lightly equipped troops, the Mongols had overwhelmed in 1241. This reformed Hungarian army fielded a formidable contingent of heavily armoured knights, trained and ready for direct confrontation. Outnumbered, exhausted, and demoralised, the Mongol forces stood little chance against the fierce and precisely coordinated cavalry charge of the Hungarians, who routed them decisively on the battlefield. Realising the dire nature of his circumstances and the futility of continued fighting, Talabuga gave the command to retreat, aiming to salvage what remained of his shattered army. However, the Mongol retreat was violently interrupted when they were ambushed by the Cumans, former nomadic allies of Hungary, who unleashed a surprise attack using their agile light cavalry to devastating effect. This ambush proved catastrophic. Talabuga's forces were nearly wiped out. By the time he managed to return to Mongol territory, his once mighty army had been reduced to little more than a memory. One chronicler dramatically noted that Talabuga returned home accompanied only by his wife and a lone horse, a hyperbolic account no doubt, but one that vividly underscored the utter devastation his army had suffered. Nogai Khan's campaign met with only marginally greater success than that of Talabuga, and his overall results were still disappointing. He lingered in Transylvania through the winter until the spring of 1286, during which he succeeded in looting a few towns, namely Regi, Brashov and Bystritsa, though these raids offered only limited strategic value. Despite these localized successes, Nogai, much like his fellow commander, failed to take control of any significant fortified cities or castles, key objectives that had eluded Mongol forces throughout the campaign. With Talabuga's forces already vanquished, King Ladislaus IV rallied his army and marched to confront Nogai's troops directly, aiming to deliver a final blow. Yet by the time Ladislaus reached Nogai's position, much of the damage had already been done. Local militias and regional forces under the command of Roland Borsa had already inflicted devastating losses on the Mongol host. Ladislaus's task was reduced to a formality, pursuing and harassing the battered remnants of Nogai's army as they staggered in retreat from Hungarian soil. The Mongols' second attempt to conquer Hungary in 1285 could not have been more different from their overwhelming success in 1241. This time, the tables had turned dramatically. Though some regions still suffered grievous losses among the civilian population, the Hungarian forces delivered a decisive military victory, leaving the once feared Mongol commanders lucky to escape with their lives. It was the structural and military reforms initiated decades earlier that allowed Hungary to resist and ultimately repel the formidable Mongol threat. A dense network of well-fortified castles effectively blocked the Mongols' advance and deprived them of the supplies and loot that were essential to sustaining their campaigns. Starvation, exacerbated by scorched-earth tactics and fortified civilian refugees, proved just as deadly to the Mongols as Hungary's reinvigorated military forces. Hungary's embrace of Western European military innovations, especially in the form of armoured knights and heavy cavalry, played a crucial role in gaining the upper hand. Following their crushing failure in 1285, the Mongols would never again attempt a large-scale invasion of Hungary, or, for that matter, any major campaign into Central Europe. Hungary's response to its earlier defeat serves as a powerful example of how adversity can spark transformative reform, laying the groundwork for national recovery and ultimate triumph. In a remarkable reversal of fortune, Hungary would go on the offensive in later years, penetrating deep into Mongol-controlled lands and eventually annexing the region of Moldavia from the Golden Horde. If you found this video interesting, please consider supporting the channel by hitting that subscribe button, giving the video a thumbs up, and leaving a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support really helps the channel grow and keeps more content like this coming your way. Thanks again, and I'll see you in the next one.